2003 by the then Governor Tommy Thompson, Judge Mill was most recently re-elected in 2012 for a 6-year term. She served until her resignation in January 2016 to serve as a Fulbright scholar. On behalf of the Institute of Law, Nirma University, I welcome you, ma'am, and invite you to address the gathering.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction, and I'm very happy to be here. Okay, I'm sorry, I just thought someone was trying to talk, but they were just not muted, I think. Hi, I'm very happy to be with you today. This is, I think, my 4th or 5th International Teaching Week, and I find them fascinating every single time I get involved. And I want to thank the Institute for bringing me again and making it possible for me to be here with you today. We're here to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart. I think it's very important. It's protecting the integrity of our courts. And courts in India, courts in the United States, courts everywhere, protecting the integrity of the courts. And I'm going to, before I go into the actual gist of the presentation, I'm going to show you just a short 2 or 3 minute video that we can discuss afterwards. So if we could do that, please, Sukrit, yes. This is a film that was made by Procter & Gamble, and they've been doing a lot of good filming lately on this issue of bias in our communities and in the world. And you can see it on YouTube if you want to see it again. Mine was a little stop and starting, but there are also about a half a dozen other ones that are available for you to see. And it's a wonderful educational opportunity that they have provided. So thank you, Procter & Gamble. I liked that video. I hope you got a sense of what it was saying about the gentleman you're viewing. It's not loud or obnoxious behavior by other people, but it's just a look or just a gesture. And it's biased, and absolutely it's biased when somebody looks at you and lets the elevator close so that you can't get on, or watches you the moment you come into a store and the security is following you. You're even just trying to teach your son how to swim, and people are looking at you like you might drown him or something. There's just this look of, we don't trust you, we don't trust you. And then it's an interesting ending where he walks into the courtroom and everyone, perhaps even the people that did those things, have to stand up for him. And there he is in a position of power, in a position of authority. And that's not how he's treated in the community before that time. So it's looking at bias from the subtle side. We think of bias sometimes as protests and screaming and calling people names and isolating people from opportunities, but it's also very subtle. And so I want to look kind of at the whole continuum of bias today and talk about what does that mean for a justice system. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and share some PowerPoints with you, and we can discuss this matter further. I'm going to save time at the end so that we can have everybody involved and take some questions and answers. But right now, we'll move to this presentation. And I'm sure that this is not an unusual symbol to you. It's one that I've always found, to be very inspiring as a woman judge. It's Lady Justice. And she is showing us that we have certain obligations to be fair, to be blind as to who is in front of us and what their position in the community is, or anything. We have to be fair to everyone, treat them fairly. And that's her blindfold. And we see that she has the scales of justice, because that's our job, is to balance those scales and to give everyone justice. And the sword. The sword is interesting because it's a symbol of power. And she does have a lot of power. All judges and everyone who's a justice professional has a certain amount of power over other people. And when you do, it has to be used appropriately. It has to be used with discretion, and it should never be overused. So this is a symbol that I like to consider about the justice system. And it sat right in front of me on my bench. As you heard, I was a prosecutor for 10 years, criminal prosecutor, and I was a judge for 23 plus years. And since then, I've been an educator and a consultant, and I'm working on the same issues of justice outside of the courtroom that I worked and supported in the courtroom. And why are we talking about bias? I mean, that's a question I think that you might be asking yourself. And I think it's a good question to ask. Bias is something that's corrupting. It's something that can spoil a system. It can spoil a office. It can spoil a family. It can spoil a community. It is corrupting. And in a justice system, that level of corruption can be devastating. And the real truth of the matter is it's not something out there with other people. We are the source of this bias, but we're also the source of fixing this situation and answering the problem. And that's what we need to talk about today. So we're going to talk about bias in general, kind of the broad look of what is bias. And it does have many different forms. It can be unconscious, which is a strange thing to say. People are not aware sometimes of the looks that they're giving people, or that the decisions that they may be making may not be completely objective and fair. And it certainly can be intentional. And some people wear their bias on their sleeve, and they want everyone to know that they feel that these people should not be where I am, or they're not as good as I am. Bias is all around us because people are all around us. So the red ones here, race, gender, religion, they're red because those are the biases that we as human beings we hold most. That is not, and when you think about it, I don't think that is a surprise to anybody. You can look around, you can see how many problems can arise out of differences between races, out of gender intolerance, out of religious intolerance. These problems come up all over the world. In fact, we've got a very serious one coming up right now. But it's also ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, sexual orientation, socioeconomic, and political. And if you really look deeply into your thoughts and what happens and what you do every day, you know that as you walk down the street, you look at people and you say, well, that person looks like they didn't sleep last night, or that person looks like they're not going to work, or that person is really interesting. They look, that's somebody I'd like to know, but can't meet them. They're just on the street. We make decisions, we make assumptions about just what we see. And I think we've all heard the story or the saying, you can't tell a book by the cover. You don't know how that person got to that place when you saw them. But we do tell the book. We do look at the book and we think we know what we see just by the cover. And that's often because we're using stereotypes, we're using old information, we're using assumptions, and those aren't things that we can do in our justice system. When I say justice system, I'm talking about everybody, from the police on the street to the advocates, to the prosecutors, to the judges, to the justices in the high courts. We're looking at a system that has to work together to protect the people that we have agreed to protect and serve. And we have agreed to provide justice. The end of the line of all that process, which is a very complex process, but the end of the line is that we have made a contract with our communities to provide justice, to serve and protect, and to provide justice to them, and to resolve their differences in a objective, fair, legal manner. Because we believe in the rule of law, and we believe that justice has to be equal, or there is no rule of law. So we're going to look at a lot of different things about bias today. And one of them is, I'm going to start with, is the issue of what we call unconscious bias. It is unconscious or implicit, it's also called. And it's when people are to some degree unaware of their behavior. And I'm going to start with that one because it's a little unusual and a lot of people haven't heard of it or understand it very well. So looking at this picture, you see two people, two young people, musicians. For purposes of this demonstration of what I'm talking about, we'll say that they are just graduating from their music institutes. They are about to go out into their professional careers, which they've been preparing for many, many years. And they want to get a position in an orchestra or a symphony. That's what they want. So they go to their audition, and there are men, there are women, there are a lot of people auditioning. And after the auditions are done, most of the women are released. Most of the people who are invited on to the next second audition, because there's a process, they are men. And that means that the people who are going to be getting this position or positions are also going to be men, if they're the only ones in the second audition. And this happened a lot in the late 60s, early 70s. And women were finding that this was simply not fair. They were not allowing them to proceed. They were not allowing them to go on. And it was sexist. It was gender bias. That was their position. Now, the people that were running the auditions, they had a completely different view. They said, no, that's silly. I mean, in fact, it's not silly, it's crazy. Why would we not want the best music? Why would we turn away the best music so that it can go to another orchestra or another symphony? Our product is music. We want the best. We would never turn away somebody who is the best. And I think they truly believed exactly what they were saying. And so some very kind of creative researchers decided to check this out. Let's look at these two opinions in the situation and see if we can see what's going on here and why they disagree so much. So they had them do their auditions with a big curtain in front of the people who were playing, and the people who were listening were sitting in the auditorium. They couldn't see who was playing. They didn't know what race the person was, what gender the person was. They didn't know anything except there was a human back there with a cello or an instrument. They even had them take off their shoes, so when they walked in the room, they didn't hear the pitter-patter of high heels or the thump-thump of men's shoes. And what do you think happened? Women were accepted into second auditions in higher numbers than ever before, and increasing ever since. What was going on there? I truly believe they were trying to do their best, but something happened between seeing the woman walk on the stage, listening to the music. There was something in between those, and there was some filter that they were unaware of, and it was hurting the bottom line of their business because they were sending away gifted, better musicians, but because they were female, they didn't think the music was as good. They didn't hear the music, which is what they wanted to do. So it's an interesting example of how it can be subtle, invisible, and dangerous to have those filters. And those are filters of prejudice or bias or negative attitudes that we all have to some degree. And so here it is. It's not about law. It's not about, justice. It's just about regular people trying to move on in their life. And they reach roadblocks that we also know exist in the justice system. So this is what has been called unconscious bias or implicit bias. And it's attitudes and stereotypes that we have inherited either recently or in our past that can guide our personal and professional behavior and can guide it to the negative end. You don't want what you think is a decision that's based on objectivity and reason and law to actually be biased and be unfair. They didn't know they were doing it, and we often don't know that we're doing it. So what can we do about all this? Now, I'm talking about bias in general right now, the whole continuum from I don't know I'm doing it and, oh, I'm doing it, I want to do it, and everything in between. Our history, our culture, our society have shaped who we are positively. They've made wonderful people. We've raised beautiful children. We've raised intellectual, creative, wonderful things. And with our communities, we have shaped many positive elements of our communities, but there's also negativity to it. So where does this come from? And I'm going to talk a little bit about history, and I should talk right now and say, I am not a scientist. And for those of you who are, I'm sure I'm going to be too simplistic for you, but I have worked in this area for a long time and in the law for a long time. And I have worked with scientists who have done this research and are teaching in this area, and they have taught me, and we've taught together when we work with judges. So I have learned a lot, but I'm not a scientist. But my understanding is that we have adapted and grown and changed throughout our entire history as being human beings. But we were not always what we are now. We were a mammal like many mammals, except we weren't very fast. We weren't very, very quick with our minds. We weren't very strong. We can't fight lions and tigers. We were dinner for a lot. So we've come up and changed and learned to be protective of ourselves and to get better at protecting our communities. And that's what we had to do. First, we had to develop a sense of fear and urgency so that we didn't just think we walk along and wait until somebody gets there and we realize that they're going to have us for dinner. We had to learn from our experiences, and we had to learn the targets and the clues of danger. And we had to learn that we are better together than we are apart. One human back in those days did not have a very good chance of survival, but several could work together to distract an attack, to work together to outwit an attacker, to build a shelter to share that they could protect and watch 24 hours a day. And as those shelters built, got bigger and the groups got bigger, we became very social beings, and we depend on each other. Our life, our ability to eat and to find water and to stay safe was dependent on each other. We had to trust. We've come a long way. We're the top of the world right now, but we weren't then. But we have a brain that started then and came till now, and it has developed in many interesting ways. One thing we've developed is we have too much information coming at us every single day. We have to categorize. We have to put it in boxes. We have to make stereotypes and we put them in there. We categorize everything to such a degree, we simplify it, which is what a stereotype is. You cannot make a 2-sentence statement about an entire culture or a history or a community or a country with a stereotype. There is diversity and variety is wide in every single group of us. And one statement is never going to cover it. But that's what a stereotype is. We look at a whole group and we say they're all like this. They're all good. They're all bad. They're all dumb. They're all mean. They're all whatever. Nobody is all anything. But those are the kind of decisions that our brain has to use in order to classify all this information. There's just too much. So everyone has preferences. You may prefer broccoli instead of a salad, but preferences don't change people's lives often, but they can. Biases don't change people's lives unless they do. We have to understand that having a bias against a group or a gender, or because you don't like people that are tall because they kind of intimidate you, or you think people who are heavy are slow and not very smart. We have these biases that we've picked up in our lifetime. It doesn't mean that we're bad people. We're not. It just means that we're human. And because we're human, we have certain abilities to focus our brain on what we want to do and need to do. We can go to other planets. We learned to fly planes, and now we go to planets. We can write incredible symphonies. We can do incredible art. We can eliminate diseases. We can do so many things because we can focus. And our brain is dealing with a lot of the minutia of our life that keeps us alive, but we can focus. And so it's a brilliant system devised to make us smarter, safer, and more protective of our clan, our people. But what we create along the way of making all these divisions and all these preferences is division. It separates us from other groups. You've probably heard of the in-group, out-group bias, and that's exactly what this is. We have a group of people, just like we did historically, that we trust. We know who they are. We may not be best friends with everybody, but we know who they are. We know what we can expect of them, and we know that they're not going to hurt me. So this is our group of trust. But we can't feel the same way about people we don't know because we haven't tested them. We don't know anything about them, and they're so different. They believe in a different God. I mean, is there more than one God? How can they believe in a different God? That's just ridiculous. That's how people feel. They feel that my world, my way, my culture is the best one. It's done good things for me. I don't think I want to know about those other cultures. And that's okay if you want to just put your head in the sand and not deal with the other cultures or the rest of the world. But if you're working in a justice system, we do not have that license to hide or to use bias. We have to be the people who see everyone as individuals, unique, and be objective and fair as we look at them, as we listen to them, and as we judge them. From the police officer on the street deciding whether to say, hey, don't do that again, or I will do something more, or saying, I'm going to have to take you into arrest at this time, or the prosecutor saying, well, I don't think this merits a criminal case at this point in time, but I am going to give you a ticket because you need to understand. Or saying, oh, I'm just going to take this to court, and this sentence that you could get could be very serious, but that's the judge's decision. Or the judge who looks and says, I'm really busy today, but I'm going to get through these cases as fast as I can. And I've seen this kind of case before. I know drug cases. I know domestic violence cases. I can make decisions here quickly. No, we can't. We have to understand that in the justice system, every decision we make affects the person who makes the decision. It affects the person who is the primary person that is receiving that decision. It affects their family. It affects their children. It affects their future. It affects whether they finish their education. It affects whether they lose a job. Everything has impact. And in our decisions every day can have that, will have to have impact. But we want to know that the impact is one that is fair and one that is appropriate, and that we've made the decision objectively, based on the law, no prejudgment, no stereotypes, and no biases. So that's a hard thing to do. But as I said, we're busy people. Everybody's busy. And this is one of the pictures that the scientists that I work with in this area have always used, and they have told me it's a good one just to explain that this, first of all, is a big iceberg out in the water. Unfortunately, they're floating more than they should nowadays. But that iceberg, the very tip of it, maybe about 7-8% of this iceberg, is representative of how much we actually do on our own. The decisions that we make, that we think about, that we ponder, that we are careful about, and the art, the music, the inventions that we make. That's where we do all that. But the rest of that are things that we have delegated to being simple, so I don't have to think about it. I'll just do it without, based on all my prior experience and my intuition. Or I don't have to think how to talk. I don't have to think how to walk. I don't have to think about, how to give my body energy. I don't have to think about everything that goes on in this human being, except what I want to think about, which is amazing that we have that power and we have that skill. But it has its downsides, because decisions are made sometimes without the proper review and analysis, because we're not thinking about what's happening. So we are really the sum total of everything we've done and everything we've learned and everything we've seen and everything we've heard around the dinner table when we were 3 years old to now. And believe me, we hear a lot and we learn a lot when we're children. If you look into the research on young children, their minds are like sponges. They just take everything in. They don't know what's good or what's bad, or that, grandma is talking about something that nobody else agrees to or believes in anymore, but you're hearing it and you're taking it in. So our childhood is very, very impactful, but our family, throughout our family, our life with our family, we learn a lot. We learn what our culture tells us is appropriate for young people and for old people and for women and for men. And these cultural norms are just that. They're social conventions. They're not law. They're not required. But we may learn that they're required, and we may still have that belief. In fact, some of the people that were reviewing those musicians might have said, well, women, not even said, but just it's like a fleeting concept. women can't travel with us. They should be with their family. That's still part of who they are and what they think. Our religion tells us how to think. Our religion tells us, what the limits of our abilities are and our duties are. And education, life experience, trainings that we have, peers are very, very, impactful. They really can pull you one way or another, especially when we're young, but not just young. As adults, we listen to our peers. We want their approval. We want to be part of that club. And if we have to follow along on an issue that we don't quite know if that's how we feel, but we spend enough time with them, we understand how they're thinking, and now we feel that way too. So we can learn biases at any age, at any time. Movies, media, books, literature, everything is up there to teach us something. And it doesn't go away. We keep in store a lot more than you think we do. And a friend of mine who is a bias, guru. She is a professional who goes internationally to different places, and she teaches people about bias and why it's not helpful and why it's not productive, and it's divisive, and it causes all kinds of problems. And businesses can't live when people can't work together. And she teaches this all the time, and she believes it in her heart and soul. And yet, she tells a story about when she was getting on a plane, which she does all the time. She walks up the steps and she turns to go inside the plane, and she starts to drop all her stuff and get organized. And all of a sudden, she's hyperventilating. Her arms are tingling. She's having trouble breathing now. She doesn't know what's going on. And she's thinking, I'm having a heart attack. I'm having a stroke. And she's not. She's not. But she sits down. She calms down. She says, take a breath. And then she realizes exactly what happened to her. She's having a panic attack, classic panic attack. And what she is in panic about is that when she got on the plane, she saw the person flying the plane, the pilot, and it was a woman. And that's what scared her. That's what terrified her. That was a signal from her brain, danger, danger, danger. You might not get it back down in this plane the right way. That is not her belief. It certainly is something that she's aware that people believe, and people in her family and her social groups may have had these opinions and voiced them, but she didn't know that she had that somewhere in her. On some level, she still thought that without even knowing that she thought it until it hit her as a panic attack. So we are snowflakes. We can't be made into groups that can be defined by one term or one statement. We can't. Stereotypes never work. We're all different. None of these elements are the same with any of us. And so we are different, and we have to be treated as an individual and as a unique individual in I'm going back one. Okay, in everything that we do. So first, you just saw, I'm going to bring up a screen that looks funny. It has names and has words and colors on it. And what this is, going back to the issue of implicit bias, like my friend just had, but I just told you about her implicit bias. She had no idea that thought even came through her head to her so that it would affect her. And she knew that she would never believe that herself when she's intelligent and thinking about it. But it was there still. So how can these things just still be there? Well, that's part of the research that's been going on for 2 decades, almost 3 decades now. And they have been doing this research all over the world on every single continent. And every single continent shows pretty much the same thing. We are all biased. So this is a human condition. And it's not your personal issue. It's not your problem. You are not bad. We are human. We can fix ourselves. We can make ourselves better. We can clean up our act, but we're human, and that's nothing to be worried about. So what they do is they test bias by a test that's called the Iat test, and it takes 2 fingers. It takes about 6 minutes, and it is anonymous. No one knows what your results are on this test. It is free and it's short. It's not going to take a lot of your time, although you can get into it. They have tests on every possible type of bias. But you can take this test, and online, it's language is not a big issue in the test, but it's mostly photos. But it is in 12 languages, at least. There's probably a lot more now. And you just give a quick answer to the question posed to you. And it can be the answer with your right finger or your left finger. And you make a quick answer. And that's what you do. Now, we're going to take a test now, and it's not going to tell you that you have any bias at all. Okay, but it is going to show you a little bit about how this test could be so quick and also so effective in determining bias and levels of bias. So what I want you to do at this time is to, when I bring up the next screen, and if we can, first, when I bring up the next screen, it's going to have a list of words. I want you to read the words out loud as fast as you can, and start at the top and at the bottom, then the second column and the third column. That's all you have to do. And you do it fast, and you do it loud. And if I can ask, if we could turn the mute off for people. It's going to get loud here for a minute, but if we could turn the mute off collectively so I can hear you when you're doing this. Is that possible? Yeah. Okay, so now, first column. Oops, wait a second. I have a mistake here. Let me just go. Okay, first column. Say the color the word is written in. I'm not hearing, but I assume you're doing it. Second column, color. Third column, the color the word is written in. Okay, now it's fast, and I couldn't hear, but I am assuming that there were some pauses that you're like, oh, I just have to think about this. And there's a little glitch or hiccup in your processing. And this is a test that shows that when something is really natural for you and comfortable, and so it's consistent with your belief system, you can give an answer really fast. But if something is a little bit uncomfortable, it's going to slow down your processing just a little bit. And that's where they can measure to the millisecond how long it takes you to give an answer. So you can't tell what the test is going to be like from looking at colors. And if you like red better than blue, that's fine. Nobody's going to matter. That's not going to matter to anyone. It's just to show you how they can do this and that it can be done very quickly. So it's called the Implicit Bias Test. Here you have it. This is the link to Harvard. It's been done over 20 years. Millions of tests have been done. And there's no reason not to do it. Because while we're talking about bias, the only bias that we're not aware of, at least we don't think we're aware of, is implicit bias. So if that is a bias that could interrupt your ability or impair your ability to do your job and your duty as a justice professional, you need to know what it is. And this is the only tool, or the easiest tool, to find out what this is. You could search all the data of everything you've done and try and figure out if you're making any decisions that appear to be unbiased, but that's a lot of work. This takes 6 minutes. Oops, I don't know what that is. Sorry about that. That was my mistake. I didn't turn off the sound on my phone. Now, next, what people often say to me, well, I'm not biased, so why should I be concerned about this? It's a good question. But my first answer is, I'm sorry, but you probably are biased. I mean, the research has really not found any cohort of people that are not biased. So it's not a matter of you have been born and been taught everything right, and there's no one in your life that's biased. It's a matter of this is how your brain has developed. Bias is our way of getting all the junk out of our yard and being able to focus on what we need to focus on. And bias is something that we can control. You know, you want to know your preferences as to food. You want to know your preferences as to literature. Your preferences are important to you, but some of them become corrupting. And that's why we need to look at them. Not everybody needs to do this. I mean, if your work or your job or your life does not make decisions that impact other people, and you're not requiring other people to live the way you want to live, then you don't need to know what your bias is. But those of us who are justice professionals, and I say that's a system, that's all of us, we're in this together. We can't afford to allow those biases to lie and to continue to impede or corrupt our work. So bias conflicts are conflict, they conflict with, there should be no S there, with our duties and ethics. We have an ethical, I would say a moral obligation to investigate them, learn about them, and learn how we can control them. And the IIT test is just one way to look at one area of bias, because bias is much bigger than just implicit. So what is bias in the justice system that's a problem? Well, if you have people who are, as a police officer, they are stopping only cars of people that they don't like or people that look like they don't like. And we know that that's true. Just look at the movie. This gentleman, everywhere he went in the movie, if you were here in the beginning of the class, he was watched by people, and they looked suspicious or afraid when they saw a Black male in a very white environment. And that's not, if police are working the same way, and it may not be Black, it may be a different ethnic group, it may be a different issue of bias, but it's a bias. And if we're treating people unevenly, it is not going to result in good justice down the road. And it teaches people that justice on the street is not fair. So I can't trust our justice system. It leads to unequal sentencing when judges have those filters or those biases. Overcrowded prisons because we're putting too many people we don't like away. Hate crimes are a terrible result of bias. Corruption both in and out of the justice system. If corruption out of the justice system isn't going to courts and being fettered out and cleaned and mitigated, it's going to get worse. So there's no access to justice because we don't believe in the justice system anymore. We don't see how the justice system is going to help us. And I might as well just take care of this on my own. In the streets, that's not what we want. And violations of civil and human rights can be addressed in a court if that court is functional. It leads to a failed justice system. And we've seen this in other countries. We've seen this in history. When justice becomes politicized, when justice becomes a justice system for a certain level of people in the community, a certain type of people in the community, and is not available to other people. And in some ways that is happening because justice has become an expensive system and a lot of people can't afford that. That leads to a failed justice system. And that is a big, bad ending. So I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, but I don't think that these are the results that you have been spending years training, working, and producing in the justice system. This isn't the results that you're looking for. So, and it's not just in the justice system, because the system is often, just a mirror to the rest of the world. We're no better than everybody else. So we have the same problems in the community that we have in the justice system. We are human, they are human. And it leads to intolerance, polarized communities, which we have all experienced, class division, ethnic division, inequality, unequal medicine, unequal education, unequal opportunity to be promoted in business, unequal treatment of the community by government and law, poverty, segregation, and wars. And we're looking at the start of one of those right now. So this is real. It can be subtle, it can be very unsubtle, but it's very real and damaging at all points on this continuum of bias. And it can be so systemic that it becomes institutionalized, that embedded in our institution are the rules that go way back to times when things were different. Religion relies heavily on history, and history is not always fair to all of us. Policies that were made in a different era, but have been in effect for a long time, continue because they've always worked. So why should we change anything? And that can become a part of a police department, the training of everyone in these areas, military, schools, businesses, hospitals, government and social services. I commend that there are many of these groups right here who are working very hard to eliminate bias and inequality in the people that they serve and in the people that they work with. Police departments all over the country, all over the world are doing this. Military is doing this. The schools are doing this. Businesses like Procter and Gamble, they're doing this. Hospitals and governments are doing it too, but it's not enough. It's not enough. We need to take this further, and we need to understand that just because that's the way we've always done things, that doesn't mean it's the legal, the right, and the moral way to do things now. So, justice, we need, let me catch up here. Let's make sure I don't miss any of my points. People are biased. People in the justice system cannot be biased. So I have devised for you a conundrum. Yeah. In the justice system, we must treat all people, even the ones we don't like, equally and fairly. We justice professionals must uphold these ideals. We must understand them and daily uphold them and not fall backwards. Sorry, that was not right. Our failure to do this would result in unequal treatment and loss of trust. And it is happening right now. It is happening right now in every community I have been in I think every community that exists. Unequal treatment is always there, and the loss of trust is what results very soon afterwards. And we lose the loss of trust in the support of our communities. What are we? We're not a system anymore. We work and we live and we are in our positions at the pleasure of our community and the citizens we serve. If we stop doing that and we start to see what we can get out of being in justice, or how this makes me look, or how people look up to me because I'm a judge, or what, we start trying to use it personally. And those are minor ways of using it, corruption and taking money and bribes. There's all sorts of bad ones. But if we don't see that this is our job to take care of this system for them, that's our one and only job, is to be just, then it's not going to end well. It's not going to end well at all. So what do we do? This is going to sound kind of silly, but I think we have to be superhuman beings. I think we have to be superhuman. You can tell your children that you're a superhuman, they'll love that. But if we can't just be normal and live with all our preferences and our doubts and our prejudices, if we are applying them in our job, we can't do that. So at least in your job and in your professional position, you have to be a different person. You have to be more human, better human than we are collectively. That's asking a tremendous amount. That's raising a big bar, but it's a bar that we need to have. And we need to know it's there, and we need to daily remind ourselves, which is why I have Lady Justice in front of me now and all the time when I'm working. So there are next steps to eliminating eliminate, I like to say eliminate, but maybe that's asking too much, but mitigating bias. Recognize the bias in each of us. Unconscious or conscious, it doesn't matter. Both are unacceptable. Take the Iat test. There's no loss and there's a lot of gain. Develop strategies to reduce the bias, like they did in the theater. They put up a curtain. Sometimes it's not difficult. There are simple strategies, and you can read about this. Carefully, thoughtfully, and objectively make decisions without emotion, without stereotypes, and without prejudging anyone or any issue. Avoid known risks. A stressful work environment is a known risk. Under stress, we don't do our best work. We all know this, but your work is extremely important and it needs to be done well. So you need to de-stress your environment the best you can. Pressure and fast-paced work. When you make a quick answer to something, it doesn't mean that that's the right answer. It means that that's the easy answer. And our work doesn't have many easy answers. So you need to slow down and think and look and review clearly what you're doing. Watch out for the in-group, out-group bias. I kind of like that guy. Oh, and that guy looks like a real jerk. That can't be how you make your decision. It cannot be. You need to let that get aside and be a professional. When we're tired or overworked, we don't do good work. So you need to take care of yourself. And acting on instinct or past experience is almost always a mistake when it comes to reviewing and making decisions. Decisions made with bias are not good decisions. And that's what we get out of instinct and past experience, mostly. Spread the word. Share the information on bias with friends, family, colleagues, bosses, neighbors, anybody you want. This is something that impacts all of them, and they should know about it. And it's a good thing to bring up. It's a good thing to bring up. Some people will be very happy that you did, maybe not all. Advocate for bias education and training for others in the justice system. That we're a system and we're all in this together. And if one group says, well, we're not going to look at that, we don't think there's bias, we don't think that's a problem, that's going to make a real problem for the whole system working. It can't work well if we don't all work together. So advocate for the people under you, the people over you, the people next to you, the people in the next agency. Tell them and tell their bosses, this is what the justice system needs so that we can function as a legitimate system seeking and providing justice. Use available data when you can get it, which is good because that's another way. And I have in my own practice, when it first became publicized, the research that there were too many African Americans receiving disparate sentences and being charged with higher offenses than non-Black Americans. And I was at that time a judge doing just drug cases. I thought, oh, this can't be. That must be other courts. That must be other people. That I couldn't do that. I couldn't. But I did use the data to look at over time, comparing white and African American people with the same crime, the same criminal background, basically, the same age, and the same and different race. And I would look at the sentences that were given. And I did see things that didn't make sense to me. And I thought there were more than there should be that were given sentences that were harsher than this other group. It was there. That's a hard pill to take, very hard. But you just buckle down and you look at that data and you see where you may have gone away off the rail, and you correct it. And what I did is I kept the data constantly so that I could look at this week and the last 2 weeks and see, are there changes? What's happening here? And there may be reasonable reasons why things were different, but there may not. And when they're not, I made changes and I was more careful. And just the fact that you look at the data says that research says will make you a better person in making decisions that are fair and objective. Just the fact that you're taking note of it and you continue to take note of it will help you build your curtain over what you're doing so that you can be more fair. And as I say many times, and I've said many times this in this presentation, we're all in this together. And we're the ones that are the problem. Bias is in us. We can't blame it on anybody else, but the answers are in us. And we can protect and maintain our justice system if we diligently and sincerely attack this problem. And Lady Justice is here because she is also an amazingly good example of implicit bias. And you're wondering, what is she talking about? But this, not this particular image, but images like this, I started researching it because I was wondering, well, how did woman become the symbol of justice? And I got back as far as Mesopotamia, where this was the image of justice at that time. I'm not sure when this started, but that's a long time ago. But most importantly, at that time, and for a long time after that, she didn't have any justice. She couldn't own property. She couldn't determine her own life. She couldn't be in a court. She couldn't bring an action. She couldn't be a judge. She couldn't be an attorney. She couldn't even determine, she was under the control of her father or her husband through her life. She didn't even have ownership or control of her children. She had no justice, and yet somehow she was selected for the image of justice. And I would love to go back in time and know what the thought system was, but maybe they thought it was pretty, it's nice, and we have to protect these poor women. So who knows? But she had no justice, and now she's a symbol of justice, and she's still fighting for justice. So I think it's something that we should keep in mind, how easily we can look at that picture and never even question the fact that in many countries, we don't even have equal rights between women. In my own country, we don't have that in our Constitution. So women are the symbol of fighting for justice, and that's the way I like to think of it. So I am going to thank you all for your listening and for the time that you've taken out to be here with me today. I'm very happy and thrilled to have an opportunity to talk to you and to talk about a very important issue. And I don't know if we have any questions that have been sent, but we have some time for questions and answers now if you'd like to present a question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the thought-provoking discussion and for making us cautious about the bias that we could develop during our life because of the familiarization with the circumstances around us. Ma'am, I received 3 questions. I'll ask 2 of them quickly. So the first question that we had was that in some cases, we justify the bias as an empirical understanding. So in those cases where we are trying to justify the bias, how do we deal with such cases? For example, essentially, they could be talking about cases about dealing with the marginalized people or dealing with women, where we have justified the bias. So how do we deal with those cases?
You've probably heard of confirmation bias. I mean, that's a bias too. There's so many biases if you want to start reading on this, but it's fascinating. But, the fact that it has existed and that it has been accepted and that it is a way of life and it is considered a cultural way of life, that doesn't mean that it is in keeping with our laws and our expectations of justice in this environment and in this country. I mean, we often have people come from other countries and they want to use their system of justice in the new country. And that is not an acceptable practice because we can't treat people differently within one geographical or justice area, we have a certain control over the manner in which we can treat other people. And you may be able to do that under another law, or you may be able to do that historically. But the law is the law now. And the law is what we all have to agree to, and we have to maintain, and we have to comply with. And it is no excuse, and it's no, you don't get a pass because, well, it's always been like that. And we like it like that is not going to help either.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Another question was that what kind of training could be provided to the police officers and advocates to keep the bias to the side while dealing with their duties?
Well, the training is being done all over the world right now, and I'm involved with some of it too. And the training is very, very important. And they're no different than anybody else. They have ethics, they have duties, and they have requirements under the law of how they function. And they are under the same law that the judges and the prosecutors and everybody is under. So we need to use the same techniques. You need to look at your decision making. How are you making this decision? Is there anything involved in this decision? If the person in front of you was not from another country and they were from your country, would you be deciding this differently? You need to question yourself and really look deeply into how you decide things. Police make very important decisions on the street, and they also make a big impression on the people that they work with on the street and the people that watch them doing what they're doing on the street. And with the advent of telephones and filming things, police have been exposed to much broader audiences of what is happening on the street. And they have got to understand that the rule of law applies to them. I know a lot of really wonderful police officers, and they have great experiences and relationships with the people on the street and the people in their district or their neighborhood. And we have to build those relationships and work together instead of seeing as a police officer, I'm above the people on the street and I am going to use that power and I like it. That's somebody that maybe shouldn't be in policing. I can't, as a judge, look down on everybody and say, okay, I'm a higher form of life because I have this job. I am exactly the same as you, and I have to maintain that. I've always been a little uncomfortable with the fact that judges sit up high in courtrooms because I think we're giving a symbol that somehow we're better or different. But I learned very quickly when you have 100 people in a courtroom and a very excitable, emotional area and things going on, it helps for me to be able to see where the next problem is coming and who's going to start a fight, and who's going to do that. I mean, it helps for security reasons. So I've backed off on that. I don't sit low, I sit high because I like the security of it. But we have to look at whether you're a police officer or whether you're, a crossing guard for the school, getting the kids across the street. We all have to have the same requirements on us. You can't abuse your power. You can't abuse your position. That's not why you're there. You're there to protect and serve. And if that isn't enough for you, then maybe there's another job you would like better.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, we have our Dean and Director, Dr. Madhuri Parekh with us. Ma'am, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you so much. I could not meet you at the beginning of the session, but I'm just hearing from Shreya, and we must say thank you to you for taking the entire course and the session also. And now I think the condition is better, so now we can plan your visit to campus.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you got to hear some of it. And thank you very much for inviting me. Yes.
It's our pleasure, and we look forward to your visit.
Thank you.
So I still remember those days, when you visited the campus, and we had that training session at our yoga room.
Yes,
so,
yes. And for those of you who weren't there with us in the yoga room, the dean is correct. I was training faculty and students on self-defense. And I am a black belt in Aikido, and I believe that everyone should be pacifist until someone tries to attack them. Then you should be able to take care of yourself.
In fact, Judge Mel, I was just preparing a file of the gender-related activities we've done. And I just came, I mean, coincidentally, I was going to the same event that
Photographs and all, yes.
Right.
Professor Parekh is mentioning right now.
I think we'll have to do that again next time I'm there. I
Yes,
think we need a refresher course.
Definitely.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And Shreya, just I would like to propose that we can have some lectures of ma'am on the US legal system as well.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah. So we can get back to you after detailed planning. We can take the consent and then we can plan lectures.
Thank you very much for being so welcoming. I really love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
So we're all done? No more questions?
No, ma'am, those were the questions that we have.
Okay, then if there's no more questions, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you too very much for making all this work for me on the computer. It helps a lot to have you there. Okay,
Thank you.
well, goodbye.
Goodbye, ma'am.
Thank you, Judge Mel. Have a good day.
Have a
Bye.
good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.